Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Syria and the neighborhood. As Washington stumbles its way through the Syrian crisis, there are those who see this horrific conflict as a perfect opportunity to topple Assad, then to move on to Tehran. At the same time, Iran and the U.S. are set to engage in direct talks for the first time in 30 years. So what's ahead? More conflict or the start of pragmatism and compromise? To CrossTalk the Iran angle to the Syrian crisis, I'm joined by Mohammad Marandi in Tehran. He is a professor at the University of Tehran. And in Washington, we cross to Faheem Younus. He is the president of the Baltimore chapter of Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA. All right, gentlemen, CrossTalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I very much encourage it. Professor Marandi, in Tehran, I know you follow Western media very carefully, and I read the neocons and the New York Times and all the other organs there, and there's always that hint there, like, oh my goodness, this is the opportunity we've been waiting for a long time. 3 for 1, Assad, Hezbollah, and Iran. But unfortunately for Mr. Obama, he hit a brick wall. When you read that kind of narrative, what's your reaction?
Yes, I think when we hear people in Washington say that a strike on Syria sends a message to Tehran, not only is it immoral, but also it shows that indeed Tehran is very much in their calculations. And the United States wants to weaken Iran through striking at the Syrian people. But I think that really what happened is quite the opposite. Obama has not only isolated himself internationally and destroyed whatever was left of his public diplomacy capabilities as a result of coming to power with the slogan of change, but also, in addition to isolating himself across the world, he has isolated himself in the United States as well. Not only is U.S. public opinion deeply against the war, but also the Senate and Congress, they have been forced to think twice about endorsing aggression against the Syrian people. And I think that weakens his position significantly. While on the other hand, the Iranian position has been strengthened. Right now, over the last few days, we see that the Iranian president has met both the Russian president as well as the Chinese president. And the relations have warmed as a result of American actions. And also the recent Iranian election with a high turnout and a high degree of support for the president, both by the electorate and also his rivals, puts Iran in a very commanding position right now.
Faheem, how do you reflect upon that? Because, even White House officials say it sends a message to Tehran. I thought we were trying to save the people of Syria. I mean, do you find that disturbing? Because that's their fallback position, it looks like to me.
Exactly, Peter. Not just me, but the tens of millions of members of Ahmadiyya Muslim community, the global Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Our position on this issue has been very clear for a number of years, which is no war, no force. We need to work with diplomacy. The world is a very complicated place, and we have a spiritual leader who has written letters to these countries, and we have been very vocal and very clear about it, that these unilateral wars where we marginalize United Nations, they are to no one's benefit, not to America's benefit and not to Syria or Iran's benefit. We're killing those people that are already dying of hunger and disease, and they need our help. They need our assistance, not our bombs.
Professor Marandi, if I go back to you in Tehran, I'm really a cynic. I still truly believe that Iran is the end game here. But at the same time, the irony of ironies, we're going to have a meeting between the leaders, or some leadership meeting between the United States and Iran. So what's in play here? Is this just fake diplomacy? We tried our best type thing? Because Obama still, he says he can strike Syria anytime he wants. He doesn't need Congress.
Yes, well, I'm not sure if there will be any direct talks between Iran and the United States at this stage, because American actions in Syria, the threats have made things more difficult. And of course, there are also the American sanctions on the Iranian central bank. The United States has been trying to make ordinary people in Iran suffer by placing an effective embargo on the Iranian central bank. The medicine in this country has become much more expensive. Some medicines are almost impossible to import, or when they are imported, the price has gone up dramatically. So as a result, many ill children and especially cancer patients and women have died. So there's a great deal of anger directed towards the United States right now in Iran. But I think the important thing really is that recent events have shown that the United States is not really as strong as it presents itself to be. Obama, it was clear, was looking for a way out of this situation, and he should be very thankful to the Russian president for providing him with a way out. It was clear that no one was going to accept any strike on Syria. The United States has already played a very immoral role in Syria in the sense that it's been breaking international law, along with dictatorships like Saudi Arabia and Qatar. It's been funding Al-Qaeda. You know, it's extraordinary that Al-Qaeda today is being supported, whereas 9/11 has just passed. And all these wars on Afghanistan and Iraq and all the misery that the people of this region have gone through were all in the name of the war on terror and the war on Al-Qaeda. So this sort of hypocrisy on behalf of the United States and during the Obama administration really shows people that there's no real difference between Obama and Bush. And I think that really weakens the United States in its confrontation with Iran.
Faheem, if I go to you in Washington, if we do go down this diplomacy route for Syria, Iran has to be involved. Now, can the United States sit down at the same negotiating table with other countries in the region, with Russia also, and sit down and try to negotiate an end to this civil war? Because I know the Iran side would be willing to do that, but does the United States have the political maturity to do that? I mean, that's one way to end this conflict if Washington does want to see the suffering of the Syrian people end.
We should, and we must, Peter, because this is the first time, or at least after a long time, that I believe that there is not a clenched fist on the other side. President Rouhani has very clearly made his intentions clear. I believe that the world is a global village, and it does not do any harm to the credibility of the United States. You know, this question is brought up all the time, that if we don't hit Syria, somehow our credibility will be affected. And I believe we need to understand that our credibility is also affected when tens of thousands of these children die of not getting their medicines because of the sanctions, when we stand by on the sidelines for 2 years and let 100,000 people die in Syria. And I think our credibility is also affected when we just put United Nations on the side and we believe that, you know, we can go into any country without any direct national security threat. And there are a lot of people in the United States who are saying that today. So I believe it's very important for us to sit with all these people on the table. It does not make us small. It is not a sign or symbol of weakness. It is a sign of maturity. And if you go back to President Barack Obama's 2011 address that he made to the State Department, he made it very clear himself that those policies of national interests do not work anymore, and we need to work with other nations. So now is the time when he's under pressure from all sides, and I'm really anxious to see which way he goes. And by the way, I would not call him out. I would not call him a coward. I believe, you know, that's also risky, because when leaders take strong positions, if he goes to the negotiating table, a lot of people now will start saying, well, he had no way out anyway. He's trying to save face. We're just making his job difficult by doing that. I think we should give him credit if he goes down that route.
Professor Marandi, I'm trying to read your mind. Would you like to react to that?
Well, yes, I was going to say that, well, first of all, the Iranian side never had any clenched fists. The Iranians have been saying from the start that the United States has to change its attitude towards the country. Instead of constantly threatening Iran with military strikes like it's been doing with Syria, instead of sanctioning ordinary Iranians, which it's been doing for years, instead of supporting extremists in the region and invading country after country, if the United States behaves in a reasonable and rational manner, the Iranians have always been willing for rapprochement. So this is
no,
has nothing
Professor
to
Marandi,
do with
I have
the
to
new
correct you here.
administration.
No, I have to correct you. I mean, Iran's supposed to be the irrational actor, right? You're the crazy people, right? That's what I've heard for 30 years. I'm an American. That's what I've heard. So
maybe you need to correct me.
Mohammad,
Yes, let me interject very
let's
quickly
go back to
here.
Professor Marandi first. Go ahead.
And let me just...
Go ahead, Professor.
Just 2 points. One is that actually the response to this is in something I wanted to state about what your previous guest was saying, and that is that the United States in Syria has not been on the sidelines. Actually, it has a great deal of blood on its hands. It's very interesting when you hear Western commentators speak about the Assad government and the crimes that they have committed, whereas the United States has been supporting heart-eating and head-cutting barbarians for over 2.5 years now. The United States is willing to confront Iran and support al-Qaeda, which carried out, according to the United States, atrocities in the United States and in New York itself. So, which is the irrational actor here? Is it the United States that 10, 12 years ago was fighting against al-Qaeda and it's now allowing al-Qaeda to thrive? Or is it Iran?
Okay, Faheem, do you want to quickly respond to that before we go to the break?
Right. I wish that, Mohammad Marandi was on Piers Morgan when I watched Iran's President Ahmadinejad. I largely agree with you, Mohammad, but I think our words have consequences. I listened to that interview for 1 hour, and you did a better job in the past 2 minutes than that person did in 1 hour. I think this is the job of leaders today, to come out and use the kind of language that brings us to table, not the kind of language that only is going to inflame the situation further, because you have a great opportunity here, and I think we're probably saying the same thing, but there is some blame to be put on both sides, that when we try to act tough, our people suffer.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to jump in here. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on Syria and Iran. Stay with our team. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing Syria and Iran. Okay, Mohammad, if I go back to you in Tehran, it was about 10 days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, told CBS News that Iran is building intercontinental ballistic missiles that could strike the United States in a matter of years. I think you know where I'm going here. I mean, talk about this dynamic, because, when it comes to Iran, Israel has a big hearing. The lobby in the United States has a big hearing. Is that in America's national interest?
Definitely not. I mean, the United States is basically, because of Israel, pursuing policies that are totally against the national interests of the United States. The United States, out of spite, because of its hostility towards Iran, has allied itself with al-Qaeda. It has allied, indirectly at least, with Saudi Arabia, the place where the al-Qaeda-like ideology stems from, with Qatar and dictatorships like that. It has allied itself with the worst regimes in the world. And it is behaving and it is supporting these groups just like it was supporting the Contra rebels in Nicaragua in the past. It's supporting groups and regimes that are against Western interests, against regional interests, against the interests of the whole world. But it's doing it basically out of hostility towards the Islamic Republic of Iran, and because Israel is pushing it to do so. But one of the interesting things right now is that despite Obama's attempt to get support from Congress and the Senate and AIPAC's full support, it was failing to do so. And I think that's a major defeat for AIPAC as well. So I'm not saying that AIPAC's influence in the United States is waning, but I think it is significant. But obviously, it's in the interest of the United States to behave more rationally towards Iran. Both the previous administration in Iran and the current administration have always been willing to deal with the United States, to move towards rapprochement. But the United States really has been unwilling to do so far. And with regards to Syria, the Iranians are very suspicious about the United States and its claims that the Syrian government was behind the attacks, basically because of its own history with the United States. The United States in the 1980s supported Saddam Hussein, helped him to use chemical weapons against Iranians and Iraqis, and then, according to WikiLeaks documents, the United States was telling its diplomats to blame Iran. for the chemical attacks. In other words, to blame the victim. So the Iranians are highly suspicious about the United States with regards to what's going on now in Syria, because the United States was involved in mass murder in Iran, and it was supporting Saddam and trying to blame the victim.
Okay, Faheem, if I can go to you in Washington, you've been living in the United States for a long time. How do you perceive when you hear this anti-Iranian rhetoric in the media? And it's nonstop, it's 24/7, it's an echo chamber. How do you respond to that?
This is, again, you know, we Americans, we love to simplify complicated issues in one-liners. This is yet another example of a simplification. As all Muslims after 9/11, all of us were declared suspects. It's the same old mentality where all black men are suspicious. I think, but the country is moving away from that, Peter. We were just talking about national interests a minute ago. I think we Americans have learned, we understand now that we have not served our national interest by these endless wars of the past 12 years. We wanted to eliminate Al-Qaeda. That was our national interest when we went into Afghanistan 11 or 12 years ago. Guess what? Today we are trying to fight Al-Qaeda in Syria. That's like a doctor who's trying to resect a tumor in the big toe, and 12 years later the same tumor is in the neck. That's what has happened. You know, we are trying to eliminate the national interest. We wanted to protect the oil supply. Today, the oil supply is in jeopardy. Our national interest was to keep weapons of mass destruction at bay and have better control over those weapons. And today, we all are afraid that militants may get their hands on those weapons of mass destruction. So I think it's very clear that the policy of national interest is not working. And that is why the Ahmadiyya Muslim community stands very clearly that it's when we teach what we teach our children in schools here, Peter, we teach them liberty and justice for all. There is no word interest in the Pledge of Allegiance. So I believe the American values, and that's why I keep repeating that we need to go back to our own values, which are absolutely around justice and equality for all. But the past 12 years, the world has not perceived us such. And what that has done, Peter, it has depleted our trust. The moment I say national interest, the signal I'm sending, you cannot trust me. Because whenever there's a fork in the road, I'm going to look after for my own interest. The world does not need to hear that anymore. And that is the reason, whether you look at Palestine or Pakistan, the trust of U.S. government as a neutral broker is less than 10%. How do you have influence at a part of the world when 90% or more people don't trust you as a neutral arbiter?
Well, I sometimes think the United States doesn't really care. Sometimes I think the U.S. doesn't really care because it'll just bomb those people it doesn't like. I'm sorry for being so glib here. Professor Marandi.
But that's so yesterday,
well,
Peter.
I'm sorry, that's the reality. That's the world record for 10 years. We can ask people for, thousands and thousands of miles in the greater Middle East.
I think it goes back.
Go ahead, Professor Marandi.
I think it goes back far more. I think it's not just the last 10 years. I mean, I think Corporal Manning has helped us to recognize that this goes back a long way. And just regarding chemical weapons, I mean, Agent Orange in Vietnam depleted uranium in Iraq, supporting Saddam Hussein in chemical weapons in the 1980s,
Fallujah.
Allowing Israel to use white phosphorus on Palestinians. This goes back a long time. It's a consistent pattern that comes from the United States, and president after president has condoned crimes against humanity for decades now in the United States. But I'm hoping that this is changing because Americans are becoming more aware of the situation, despite the fact that the Western media has been trying very hard to justify an attack on Syria, but you see that American public opinion is almost completely against it. And this is really good news, I think. Again, it's difficult to be certain that there's going to be a big change in the United States, but I think it makes it much more difficult for the president, the U.S. president, and politicians in the United States to convince Americans for them to attack another country or to carry out further aggression in the years to come.
Professor Marandi, if I can stay with you, one way to solve the Syrian crisis is through diplomacy. I'm a strong believer in diplomacy after everything has been done. And Iran is a key player here. Again, Obama has boxed himself into a corner. I mean, he needs Iran's help. He needs Russia's help. We've already seen that. Can Iran be a help to the United States in solving the crisis in Syria? And can the Americans, will the people in Washington ever change their mind about Iran? I mean, it defies stupidity. It defies stupidity right now. Go ahead.
Well, administration after administration in Iran have been trying to find a way forward to change the relationship with the United States. During the Rafsanjani administration, the Iranians allowed Conoco into the country. Then the U.S. slapped sanctions against Iran. During the Khatami administration, the Iranians were sympathetic to the United States after September the 11th. And in Afghanistan, they both had an interest in fighting extremism. Then Iran was called the axis of evil. During the Ahmadinejad administration, the United States, the Iranians agreed to talks with the United States in Iraq. Again, the United States simply increased sanctions against the country. And now, as soon as President Rouhani comes to power, the United States implements even further sanctions on the eve of his inauguration, which is extraordinary. It shows that the United States simply does not have goodwill. How is the Iranian government going to be convinced that the United States can sit down and talk with the United States when the United States behaves in such an irrational and hostile way? And on the other hand, the United States at this stage has isolated itself. The Iranians are improving relations, thanks to Obama, with the Russians, with the Chinese, with the Indians, with BRICS countries and other non-Western countries. And even in Europe, we see countries very dissatisfied with American behavior. For example, in the case of both in Britain, for example, Parliament rejected war, which I think came as a surprise to all of us, you know, with the former Prime Minister in England supporting the war and being an American poodle, and Italy, for example, and Germany being opposed to any aggression by the United States. So the world is changing, and Obama really needs to change his relationship with Iran. Otherwise, the only allies he has left is Saudi Arabia, Israel, an apartheid state, and the Al-Qaeda-like groups in Syria, and others in Libya as well. The United States and the Europeans have destroyed Libya.
Faheem, that doesn't sound like the kind of crowd I want to hang out with.
Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. Of course, I've talked about the military-industrial complex in the USA, and as Mohammad said, there's a growing awareness against that in the country. Everybody's saying we're becoming war-weary, but that's not to say it's all bad. There is still something very special about the United States, and I'm a very loyal American. I'll have to stand up for that, because still, you see, in 2006, more people came legally to America than the rest of the world combined.
Well, I wonder how many of them were refugees from American wars. I really would like to know the answer to that. Okay, Professor Marandi, I'm going to give you a last word.
I've already conceded that point.
You know, there's an important point has been raised here, and in fact, the Russian president gave an appropriate response to this idea that's constantly put forward by American officials and Obama itself, and that's American exceptionalism. The idea that the United States is somehow exceptional and different from other countries is I think, very dangerous. The United States is a country like any other country, and it can do great evil as it has in the past, and it is doing as we speak. I myself am a victim of chemical weapons. I survived
Professor Marandi, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you on that very important and personal point. Many thanks today to my guests in Tehran and in Washington, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, CrossTalk rules. I love you.